Story 1. My parents canceled my birthday to take care of my favorite sister's children. So I went on a trip without telling them. Now they are upset because I didn't ask them for permission. This happened a few weeks ago and I haven't stopped going over it in my head. To give a little context, I, 26M, have always been the extra one in my family. My older sister, Emily, 34F, is the star daughter. She is married, has 3 adorable but chaotic children, lives in a nice house in the suburbs, and leads the perfect life my parents always dreamed of. Meanwhile, I live alone in a small apartment in Denver with a job I like but am not passionate about. And surprise, I don't have children or a stable partner to present at family gatherings. I guess that automatically makes me less important. Growing up, Emily was always the responsible one and I was the problematic one. I admit, I wasn't a saint. I skipped classes, came home late a million times, and even repeated chemistry in high school. But when I got to college, I straightened up. I graduated with a degree in finance, got a good job, and have been building my life little by little. However, it seems that no matter what I do, my parents are always waiting for me to screw up. Fast forward to the present. My birthday was last month, and for the first time in a long time, I was excited. I had a whole weekend planned, a quiet dinner at a local brewery with friends and a family barbecue the next day. My parents even said they would bring my favorite dessert, something they hadn't done in years. It seemed that they were finally giving me some priority. But, of course, nothing in my family goes as it should. 3 days before my birthday, my mom called me. From the moment I answered, I knew something was wrong because she used that sweet and fake tone she always uses when she's about to give bad news. She started with, "Honey, you know we love you very much, right?" Never a good start. Then she launched into a monologue explaining that Emily's husband, Brian, had an emergency business trip that weekend and that Emily had no one to watch the kids. It seems that their usual babysitter was on vacation and Emily was desperate for help. So, my mom said, "We're going to have to cancel the barbecue. Maybe we can go to your dinner if we have time. But Emily really needs us right now." I was in shock. Not only were they canceling the barbecue, but they were saying it as if it wasn't a big deal. As if it were perfectly normal to leave me hanging to take care of my sister's children. I tried to stay calm and replied, "But this was already planned. Can't Emily get someone else? What about Brian's family?" My mom sighed, and I could even hear her rolling her eyes through the phone. "You know Brian's parents are always busy. And Emily is your sister. For God's sake, family is there to help each other." I wanted to argue more, but I knew it would be useless. This was the usual pattern. Emily had a problem and everyone dropped everything to fix it. It didn't matter that I had given them weeks' notice. It didn't matter that this was the only time in years that I had asked them for something. When I hung up, I felt a mixture of anger and sadness that I couldn't shake. I called my best friend, Jake, to vent. He listened patiently and then said, "Bro, you have to stop letting them walk all over you. If they're not going to celebrate your birthday, celebrate it yourself. Do something you really want to do." And that's when the idea came to me, a solo trip. I had been wanting to visit the Grand Canyon for years, but there was always something that got in the way. Work, money, family commitments. But now, with my parents making it clear that they didn't care about my birthday and with no important plans, it seemed like the perfect time to do it. I checked my work schedule, packed, and didn't tell my parents I was leaving. Partly because I didn't want explanations and partly because I wanted to see if they even noticed I was gone. The trip was amazing. I played my favorite playlist, stopped at random restaurants, and enjoyed the freedom of being alone. When I arrived at the Grand Canyon, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. I spent the weekend hiking, taking pictures, and enjoying the views. It was just what I needed. A reminder that my life doesn't have to revolve around pleasing others. But of course, the peace didn't last long. Sunday night, I checked my phone and saw a barrage of missed calls and text messages from my parents. My mom's messages ranged from worried, "Are you okay? We didn't see you at dinner," to manipulative, "I can't believe you left without telling us. You know how worried we are." Even my dad, who rarely sends messages, wrote, "We need to talk when you get back." This was childish. Emily, as expected, also chimed in, "Typical of you to make everything about yourself." When I finally got home and called them, the conversation was intense, to say the least. My mom accused me of being selfish and disrespectful for disappearing without telling them. I replied that they didn't seem to care until they realized I wasn't there. The argument escalated quickly, bringing up all the family issues, my supposed immaturity, their blatant favoritism towards Emily, and the fact that they have never put me first. In the end, my dad was yelling, my mom was crying, and I was exhausted. I hung up knowing that nothing had been resolved. But being honest, I don't regret the trip. For the first time in years, I did something just for me. After the call with my parents, I sat on my couch for a long time, just processing everything. On the one hand, I was furious. How could they act like I was the problem when they had clearly decided that my birthday was less important than taking care of Emily's children? But on the other hand, I also felt this deep sadness, as if I had just confirmed something I had felt all my life, that I was a priority only when there was nothing else to do. A few days passed without much contact. I decided to focus my energy on work and planning my next step. Although I loved my trip to the Grand Canyon, returning to reality reminded me that sooner or later I would have to face this family situation. Despite everything, I didn't want to cut off the relationship with my parents. Don't get me wrong, I was hurt, but cutting ties seemed too extreme, at least at that moment. So I opted for the usual tactic: keep my distance until the storm calmed down. A few days later, my mom called me again. This time her tone was much calmer. Or at least she was trying. She said something like, "Honey, I think we should talk. I don't want this situation to get out of hand. Maybe we made a mistake by not prioritizing your birthday. But I don't think you handled it in the best way by disappearing like that." I took a breath, trying not to explode, and said, "A mistake, Mom? This wasn't a simple mistake. You canceled my plans because Emily couldn't get organized. It's not the first time you've done this. But it was the last straw." She sighed, and then came the line she always uses to minimize things. "You don't have children, so you don't understand how difficult it is to be a mother. Sometimes you have to make sacrifices for the good of the family." That made my blood boil. Of course, I understand, Mom, but why am I always the sacrifice? Why do I always have to be the one who gives in? The one who adapts? The one who understands? You never ask the same of Emily or Brian. It's always me. The conversation became even more tense. My dad took the phone at one point and said something like, "We're not saying we don't love you, but you should try to see this from our point of view. Emily needed help. Those kids couldn't be left alone. And what about me?" I replied, "I needed my family for once in my life. Was it so difficult to tell Emily that this time you couldn't help?" Their response, as always, was a silence that said it all. They had no arguments. They knew what they had done was wrong, but they would never fully admit it. After that call, I decided that I needed to put real distance. Not just emotional. I talked to Jake again and he suggested I take another trip. Something that would allow me to disconnect from the family drama. I loved the idea, so I started looking for destinations and ended up choosing Yellowstone. It was another place I had always wanted to go, and I felt that a trip to nature would be just what I needed. I booked an Airbnb near the park and started planning my hiking routes. I didn't tell my parents or my sister anything because, frankly, I didn't feel like I owed them any explanations. I only told Jake and a couple of close friends. I said goodbye to work on Friday and drove to Wyoming. The trip was incredible. The landscapes, the fresh air, the silence, everything helped me to put my thoughts in order. For a few days, I completely forgot about my family and all the drama. I focused on myself, on what I wanted and what made me happy. It was liberating, but, as expected, the peace didn't last long. On Sunday, after a long hike, I checked my phone. There were several message and call notifications. Most of them from my mom, but there were also some from Emily. I opened the messages out of curiosity, and the narrative had already changed. "My mom, why are you ignoring us? We just want to talk to you. You left again without telling us. This isn't normal anymore. I hope you know how selfish you're being. You're pushing us away and hurting the family." Emily, on the other hand, had a much less maternal tone. "What are you trying to prove? Are you too busy for us? Is it so hard to be part of this family?" When I got home on Monday, I found an email from my dad. Yes, an email. It basically said that my attitude was immature, that I was trying too hard to show that I didn't need my family, and that this is not what adults do. That's when something clicked in my head. All this time I had been waiting for my parents to change, to put me on the same level as Emily. But after that last week, I realized something important. It was never going to happen. No matter what I did, they would always find a way to minimize my feelings and justify Emily's. In the end, I replied to my dad's email with a short but direct message. "I get it. I'll never be a priority for you. And I'm tired of trying. If you really want to talk about this, we can do it when you're ready to admit your mistakes. Not mine." And with that, I left the matter in their hands. After sending that email, I decided not to seek further contact with my parents or Emily. I was tired, emotionally drained. I had reached the point where I no longer had the energy to argue or try to justify myself. During the following weeks, I tried to focus on my life. I went out more with friends, picked up a couple of hobbies that I had stopped doing, and started considering the idea of moving to another city. Far from all this drama, however, the tranquility didn't last. About 2 weeks after sending my email, My parents showed up at my door unannounced. They never do that, so I knew something big was coming. I froze when I saw them, still in their jackets, as if they had decided at the last minute to come directly from their house. My mom had that look of, "We're going to solve this now," while my dad seemed more resigned, as if he didn't want to be there but felt obligated. I opened the door and said, "What are you doing here? I didn't ask you to come." My mom sighed deeply and said, "Honey, we can't go on like this. This is getting out of hand and it's not healthy for any of us. We need to talk." I didn't want to, but I knew they weren't going to leave until they said what they had to say. So I invited them in, offered them coffee, although I really didn't want to prolong their visit, and we sat at my small dining room table. My parents exchanged glances as if they were deciding who would start. Finally, my dad spoke. "We know we've made mistakes," he began. "Maybe we haven't always given you the attention you deserved, but you have to understand that it was never our intention to make you feel less important." I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to stay calm. This was a start, but not enough, so I replied, "If you really understand, why do you keep minimizing everything I say? This problem is not new. I've been feeling like second best for years, and every time I mention it, I find excuses, not solutions." My mom intervened. "Then they're not excuses, honey. It's just that family is complicated. Emily has always had a lot of responsibilities, and you have always been more independent. We thought you didn't need us as much." That comment hurt me more than I expected. I laughed sarcastically and said, "Independent? That's what you think? Maybe I had to be because I had no choice. Because you were always busy helping Emily." The conversation intensified quickly. I explained how I felt when I saw that they not only canceled my plans but did so without any remorse. I reminded them of all the times I had to adapt to Emily's needs while mine were ignored. I talked about past birthdays, family gatherings, and big and small decisions where it always seemed that my place was less important. My parents were quiet for a moment. My mom, visibly emotional, said, "It wasn't our intention to make you feel that way. Maybe in our effort to help Emily, we forgot to balance things. But we never thought that what we were doing could hurt you so much." My dad, less emotional but equally serious, added, "If we had known, we would have handled it differently. But we also want you to understand something. We're not perfect. We do the best we can. But sometimes we make mistakes." Even though their words sounded sincere, something in me couldn't let it go so easily. So I asked, "And what are you going to do differently now? Because talking about this is fine. But if nothing changes, it's just going to be more of the same." My mom seemed to take a moment to process what I said before answering. "We want to do better. We want to be more present for you. But we also need you to talk to us. To not shut down or walk away like you've been doing lately." That comment made me feel a pang of guilt, but also anger. So I replied, "I did talk, Mom. I've been trying to get you to listen to me for years. And we always end up in the same place. I'm not shutting down for no reason. I'm shutting down because I'm tired." My dad raised his hands in a sign of surrender. "Okay, you're right. This isn't something we can fix in a single conversation. But we want to try. If you're willing." I didn't know how to respond to that. On the one hand, I had waited for this kind of acknowledgement for years. But on the other, the wounds I carried weren't going to disappear overnight. I felt that if I gave them another chance, I could be opening the door to more disappointment. But if I didn't, what next? Cut ties completely? After a long silence, I said, "I don't promise anything, but we can try. If you really want to fix this, you have to show it. Not just say it." My parents seemed relieved, but I still felt distant. I walked them to the door. And before leaving, my mom hugged me and said, "Thank you for giving us this opportunity. We know we don't deserve it, but we're going to try our best." I didn't reply, but I nodded, feeling more confused than relieved. That night I talked to my friend Jake and told him everything. His advice was clear. Give them a chance. But don't lower your standards. If they disappoint you again, at least you'll know you did your part. And so I decided to wait and see what my parents did. But honestly, I still doubted if they could really change after so many years. The following weeks were strange, to say the least. My parents seemed genuinely interested in making things right, although I wasn't sure how much of it was real and how much was just an attempt to appease me. They texted me more often, asking how I was and trying to start conversations that they would never have started before. They even offered to visit me again, but this time I asked them to wait. I needed space to decide if I really wanted to continue with this reconciliation effort or if they were just dragging it out. It seems that my parents, in their attempt to balance things, were spending less time helping Emily, and that did not go unnoticed. One afternoon I received a message from her that said something like, "Thanks for stirring things up with Mom and Dad. Now they keep acting like it's all your fault and I'm the bad guy. Happy?" That message made me laugh bitterly. It was so typical of Emily to make everything about her. I replied, "I'm not stirring things up, Emily. I'm just asking to be treated with the same respect as you. If that bothers you, that's your problem, not mine." I didn't get a reply, which was a relief. A few weeks later, my parents invited me to dinner. They said they wanted to talk more about how to move forward. And they assured me that Emily wouldn't be there. Although I hesitated, I accepted. I felt that if there was a time to see if they were really willing to change, it was this. When I arrived at their house, the atmosphere was tense, but also calm. My mom had prepared my favorite dish, a gesture she hadn't made since I was a teenager. And my dad seemed more relaxed than usual. We sat at the table, and after the initial greetings and some small talk, my dad got straight to the point. "We want to apologize. Truly," he began. "We've been doing a lot of thinking since we last talked. And we know we haven't been the parents you deserved. We can't change the past. But we want to show you that we're willing to change things from now on." My mom nodded, her eyes already filled with tears. "We haven't been fair to you. And that's something I'll always regret. Emily has always needed more help. Or at least we thought so, and in the process, we left you aside. But that doesn't mean we don't love you or that we don't value who you are. We just want a chance to show you that we can do better." Even though their words were sincere, I couldn't help but feel skeptical. It wasn't the first time they had told me something similar. So I replied calmly but firmly, "I don't need words, I need actions. If you really want to show that this is going to change, you'll have to do it over time. I'm willing to try, but I'm not going to accept anything less than a real effort." They both nodded solemnly. They seemed to understand that this wasn't going to be easy or immediate. The dinner continued in relative calm, although I still felt that emotional distance between us. After years of feeling ignored, I wasn't going to open up completely overnight. However, it was nice to have a conversation where it seemed that for the first time they were really listening to me. At the end of the night, when I said goodbye, my mom hugged me and said, "Thank you for giving us this opportunity. Son, we know we don't deserve it, but we're going to show you we can change." I drove home feeling confused. On the one hand, I wanted to believe them. I wanted this to be the beginning of a new stage in our relationship. But on the other, I feared that everything would go back to the same old thing. And I wasn't sure if I could handle another disappointment. The following days passed without much drama. My parents continued trying to keep in touch, although this time in a less invasive way. They would send me casual messages asking about my day, but without pressuring me to respond. I also noticed that they were trying to be more neutral with Emily, which, honestly, was a small relief. But the real test came a few weeks later, when a small incident with Emily put everything to the test again. One Saturday, I received an unexpected call from my sister. She sounded upset, as always when something didn't go her way. She told me that Brian was out of town and that she needed urgent help with the children because mom and dad weren't available. Hearing that, I knew something was up. Emily never turned to me for these kinds of things. She always went straight to my parents. I asked her, "Why aren't they available? What happened?" She was silent for a moment before answering, visibly annoyed. "They said they were busy. What else matters? Can you come or not?" I wanted to say no. I wanted to make it clear that it wasn't my responsibility to solve her problems. But at the same time, I knew this could be an opportunity to see if anything had really changed with my parents. So I replied, "Let me talk to them first." I called my mom, and when she answered, I could tell she was nervous. She explained that Emily had indeed asked them for help, but this time they had decided to tell her no because they wanted to stand firm in their decision to not always prioritize her over me. "It seemed to us that it was time for Emily to learn to solve these things on her own," said my mom, "and we also thought that if she really needed help, she could ask you for a change." I didn't know how to respond to that. It was the first time in a long time that I felt like my parents were really trying to balance things. However, it also bothered me that they were using this situation to prove a point. It wasn't my job to pick up the pieces when they didn't want to get involved. After hanging up, I called Emily and told her I couldn't help her, making up an excuse about being busy. I didn't want to step into the role my parents had occupied for so long. When I hung up, I felt strangely relieved. For the first time in a long time, it seemed like things were changing, although there was still a long way to go. After the incident with Emily, things in my family took an unexpected turn. For the first time, it seemed like my parents were genuinely trying to correct their behavior. I noticed small changes that, although modest, were significant. They called me to ask how I was doing, and not just to talk about Emily or her children. They stopped inviting me to gatherings where they knew I would be uncomfortable. And, most surprisingly, they started to acknowledge when they were wrong. However, my relationship with Emily remained a disaster. Since my parents told her no that time, her attitude towards me went from indifference to openly hostile. She ignored me in family chats and never missed an opportunity to make sarcastic comments about how everyone now had to adjust to my needs. One day, during a family video call, the subject exploded. The topic of conversation was a possible family trip for the holidays. Something we hadn't done together since I was a teenager. My parents suggested that they consult me before deciding on dates since they knew my work schedule was complicated. That's when Emily blurted out, "Since when do your lives revolve around him? You've always done what's best for this family. And now it turns out we had to adapt to his whims." The tension on the call was palpable. My parents tried to mediate, but I was tired of staying calm. I replied, "Emily, this has nothing to do with whims. All my life I've adapted to you. While you've had all the attention, it's time for things to be different." She laughed bitterly. "Attention? Are you listening to yourself? You have no idea what it's like to deal with the weight of responsibility that I've always had. Do you know how difficult it is to raise 3 children and manage everything while you go on trips to find yourself?" That comment hit me, but I stood firm. "No, I don't know what it's like to raise 3 children, Emily, but I do know what it's like to grow up feeling like I was never enough for this family. If you need everyone to keep prioritizing you to feel important, that's not my problem." The conversation ended abruptly. My parents sent me messages later apologizing for not having intervened enough. Strangely enough, I wasn't that bothered by what Emily said. I think I had already accepted that she was never going to see things from my perspective. The important thing for me was that my parents, at least this time, didn't automatically back her up as they used to. A few weeks later, something unexpected happened. I received a call from my mom. This time, it wasn't to ask me for anything or to mediate in another conflict. She simply wanted to share something she had been thinking about. She said, "I know we haven't been fair to you, and I want to thank you for having the patience to give us another chance. I've been reflecting a lot on how we treated Emily and you differently. We always assumed that because she had more responsibilities, you could manage. Now that I say it, she didn't know exactly how to feel." Finally, I replied, "Thanks for saying that, Mom. All I want is for you to see me for who I am. Not as a problem or a lesser responsibility. If we're working on that, then it's worth trying." That was a key moment for me. Although I knew the process would be long and the wounds of the past wouldn't disappear easily, I felt that this was a genuine step toward something better. Over time, my relationship with my parents continued to improve. It wasn't perfect. There were still times when the old dynamics surfaced. But the difference was that now they seemed more aware of their actions. They apologized when necessary. And most importantly, they began to include me more in their lives in a way that didn't feel forced. As for Emily, the relationship remained distant, but that was okay with me. I no longer felt the need to seek her approval or try to convince her of my point of view. She was living her life and I was living mine. Story 2. My wife left me with our children to pursue her career dream. But things didn't turn out as she expected. And now she wants to come back. But I have other plans. Approximately 9 months ago, my life took an unexpected turn. It wasn't something I planned or wished for. Rather, it was as if someone decided to pull the rug out from under my feet without warning. My ex-wife, 42F, and I, 43M, had been married for years, sharing a life that, although not perfect, was ours together. We had 2 children, 6 and 8 years old, and lived in a quiet Midwestern town in the United States. Near our families, I ran a small local business that gave us stability, while she had a decent job at a marketing company. It seemed we had found a balance, until she decided to break it all. It started with a confession that at first didn't seem so serious. "I've applied for a senior management position at a startup," she told me one night, with a sparkle of excitement in her eyes that I hadn't seen in a long time. I remember thinking, good for her, until she added, "It's in another city." Well, actually, in another state. It was then that the knot in my stomach appeared. I tried to process what I had just heard, but I didn't have much time because she continued. "And I got it. I start in 2 weeks." It wasn't a conversation. It was an announcement, something already decided. At that moment, my mind flooded with questions. When did she plan this? Why didn't she tell me before? How did she think this would affect our family? But instead of expressing those concerns, the only thing that came out of my mouth was, "And what about us?" There began a discussion that lasted for days. She argued that this was the opportunity of a lifetime, that she was tired of the monotony, and that she couldn't pass up something like this. I tried to make her understand that it wasn't just her life that would change. That we had 2 children who needed stability and a home, that we couldn't just abandon. There was also my personal situation. My parents, both elderly and with health problems, depended on me. Moving was not a viable option. Despite everything, she had already made her decision. She didn't say it with those words, But it was clear. "I'm going, with or without you," was her final statement. One night, she left me stunned. I never thought she would reach the point of choosing a job over her family. I naively believed that I could make her change her mind. But I was wrong. Finally, we reached an agreement that, in retrospect, was a mistake. She would move first, set up her life, and start her new job while I stayed with the children in our house. According to her, it was a temporary solution. She would come on weekends, and I could decide later if I wanted to move with her. She promised that she would do everything possible to maintain the connection with us and show that the distance wouldn't be a problem. The day she left was strange. There were no tears, no long hugs, just a hurried, "See you soon," and a kiss on the forehead for the children. When I closed the door, I stood there staring into space, wondering if that was the last time our family would be whole. The first few weeks weren't so bad, or so I kept telling myself. We talked on the phone every night, and the children were excited to tell her what they had done during the day. She promised that she would return soon to visit us, but she always seemed to have some excuse to postpone her return. The first time she canceled her weekend trip, I understood. "Work is demanding, honey. I'm trying to adapt," she said, but the second time, something inside me began to doubt. People, before continuing, if you are enjoying the stories, I ask you to subscribe to the channel. We are almost reaching a very important goal of 1,000 subscribers. While she moved away, I tried to keep everything running. I took the children to school, prepared their meals, managed my business, and cared for my parents. Everything fell on me, and although it was exhausting, I clung to the hope that she would return. But gradually, her calls began to space out. Instead of every day, they went to every 3, then to once a week. When I tried to call her, she rarely answered. The children began to notice her absence more than I did. "Why isn't mom coming?" my 6-year-old daughter asked while playing with a drawing she had made for her. "She said she was coming this time, right?" my son added. I tried to give them reassuring answers. Something like, "She's busy with work, but she'll be here soon." But even those words felt empty. One day, while checking my email, I saw an email from her. It was short and to the point. She wanted a divorce. There weren't many explanations, just calculated and cold words about how she thought this was best for everyone. I felt my world crumble. Not just for me, but for the children. How could she be so indifferent to what was happening to us? When I opened that email, I went blank for a moment. I thought it was some kind of sick joke. But upon reading it again, I realized it was real. She had worded the message with a coldness I didn't expect. What hurt me most wasn't the fact of the divorce itself, but the way she communicated it. Without a call, without a conversation in person, just an email. It was as if she was closing a business deal, not a relationship of more than a decade. I replied as calmly as I could, asking for explanations. I didn't want to seem desperate, but I needed to understand how we had come to this. The next day, she called me. Her voice sounded mechanical, as if she was reading a script. "This isn't working. You know it as well as I do. I'm too busy with my new life here. And you don't want to move. There's no point in continuing to pretend this is going to get better." Each word was like a dagger. I tried to talk about the children, about how they were suffering from her absence, but she simply dismissed it. "They can come visit me when they're older. For now, I think it's best for them to stay with you. I don't want to interfere with their routines anymore." Those words made it clear that she wasn't just abandoning the marriage, but also our children. After that call, something inside me changed. Sadness was replaced by anger. How could someone be so selfish? For years, I had sacrificed my own desires for our family, supporting her in everything, and now she was simply walking away, letting me pick up the pieces. But I knew I couldn't afford to break down. I had to be strong for my children. The following weeks were a whirlwind of emotions and legal procedures. She wanted a quick and clean divorce, and I honestly had no reason to fight. I kept the house and custody of the children, while she freed herself from any direct obligation. "It's best for everyone," she told me in our last conversation before signing the papers. I just nodded, tired of arguing. During that time, I began to notice strange patterns in her behavior. Although she had said she was very busy with work, her social networks told a different story. Photos in expensive restaurants, exclusive events, and meetings with people who looked like they were from a television series. There was a group of friends that constantly appeared. Glamorous women, all single or divorced, with a lifestyle that didn't resemble the life we had built together at all. It didn't take long for me to discover who was behind her transformation. An old friend of hers whom I always considered a bad influence. This woman was everything I couldn't stand. Manipulative, superficial, and unscrupulous. She was an expert at getting involved with wealthy people and taking advantage of them. When I learned that my ex-wife was relying on this person to navigate her new life, everything began to make sense. As the months passed, she practically disappeared from our lives. No more calls, no more promises of visits. The children stopped asking about her. Something that broke my heart but also made me feel a certain relief. It was easier to live without the constant disappointment. Little by little, I began to rebuild our routine. I found a rhythm with the children and focused on my work. It was hard, but at least I had peace. However, the calm didn't last long. Approximately 4 months after the divorce, I received an unexpected call. It was her. At first, I thought about ignoring it, but something prompted me to answer. Her voice, previously firm and confident, was now shaky and laden with emotion. "I need to talk to you," she said between sobs. "I've made a mistake." What followed was a monologue of regret and despair. She told me how her new life wasn't what she expected. The company that had hired her was in crisis, and the promises of large salaries and growth turned out to be smoke. Her salary had been cut twice, and now she could barely cover her expenses. To top it off, the friends she had so admired had cast her aside as soon as her economic situation ceased to be convenient. I tried to maintain my composure while she continued. "I miss the children. I miss you. This was all a mistake. Please, I want to come back." There were tears in her voice, but I didn't feel the compassion I expected. Instead, I felt a cold rage. She had made selfish decisions without considering the consequences. And now that things hadn't turned out as she expected, she wanted me to fix her mess. I told her that I needed time to think. Although in reality, I already knew my answer. I wasn't willing to allow her to re-enter our lives so easily. While hanging up, something became clear. This story wasn't over yet. But this time, I would set the rules. After hanging up the call, I remained silent for a long time. There were so many emotions going through me. Above all, I felt clarity. For the first time in months, I had an advantage in this situation, and I wasn't going to waste it. That night, while the children slept, I reflected on everything that had happened since her departure. I thought about the long nights I spent awake, worried about how I would manage everything without her, about my children's tears, wondering why their mother didn't call them, about the excuses I had to make to justify her absence. And I thought about the man I had become by dealing with all of that. I wasn't the same person she had left. I was stronger, more determined, and had learned that some doors shouldn't be reopened. 2 days later, she called again. This time, I answered immediately, determined to confront her. Her tone was a mixture of pleading and desperation. "Please let me explain in person. I want us to talk about this calmly. I don't want you to think I'm trying to come back out of selfishness. But I need my family back." Her voice trembled, but there was something in it that made me suspicious. It wasn't just regret, it was fear. I told her we could talk, but we would do it at my house and on my terms. When she arrived, I could see the wear and tear on her face. She was thinner, with dark circles under her eyes, and her once haughty gaze now seemed lost. It was as if I was facing a stranger. We sat in the living room, away from the children, who were playing in their rooms. She started with a rehearsed speech, talking about how she had idealized her new life and how it had been a mistake to leave her family. I let myself be carried away by the promises of a bright future. But all I got was emptiness. "I've lost everything, but what hurts the most is realizing that I've also lost you." She wanted to seem moved, but every word reminded me of how little she had valued what she had. I asked her directly, "And why should I believe you now? What has really changed?" Her answer was hesitant. "Because I've learned from my mistakes. Because I want to be a better mother. A better person." I couldn't help but feel that something was missing from her story. Then I decided to press her. "You say you lost everything. But what happened to your friends? Where are they now?" Her face contracted, and she finally began to reveal the truth. It turns out that her group of friends weren't as loyal as she thought. When she started having financial problems due to the cuts at her company, they stopped inviting her to their gatherings. The supposed support circle was nothing more than a group of opportunists who only stayed together as long as they could all contribute something to the glamorous lifestyle they shared. When she ceased to be useful to them, they left her behind without remorse. In addition, I discovered that her closest friend, the one who had convinced her to move, had manipulated her from the beginning. That woman, whom I had always viewed with suspicion, had used my ex-wife as a sort of adventure companion, someone to share parties and contacts with, but never as a true friend. Now that she was alone and without money, my ex realized that she had been used. But the most shocking part came later. Between tears, she admitted that she had tried to fill the emotional void by dating other people. "I thought I could find something similar to what I had with you. But all I found were empty relationships. People who only saw me as a temporary fling. I feel broken." That confession, instead of provoking compassion, made me feel more sure of my decision. She had reduced our relationship and our family to a disposable experiment. And now she wanted to come back when she couldn't find anything better. When she finished speaking, there was a long silence between us. She was waiting for me to say something, but I wasn't ready to give her what she was looking for. Instead, I was direct. You made your decisions, and those decisions have consequences. You can't just come back here as if nothing happened. I'm not your safety net. She tried to protest, but I interrupted her. Do you know how many nights I spent explaining to the children why their mother wasn't there? Do you know how long it took me to rebuild some stability in their lives? You broke this, not me, and now you want me to fix it for you? Her face filled with tears. But I continued, I'm not going to give you an answer now. I need time to think about what's best for my children. Not for you. She left that night with more tears and pleas. But my decision was practically made. I wasn't going to allow her to come and go from our lives as she pleased. This time, I had control. That same night, I started planning what would come next. I knew that my ex's return would bring complications and that she would probably try to regain her place in the children's lives. But I also knew something else. I had the opportunity to make sure she understood, once and for all, that her actions have consequences. And I wasn't going to let her get out of this situation without learning that lesson the hard way. The days following her visit were emotionally tense. On the one hand, I felt a kind of relief because she had finally exposed her situation and acknowledged her mistakes. But on the other hand, the idea of letting her back into our lives seemed intolerable. I had seen the children struggle to adapt to her absence, and I had worked too hard to stabilize our lives to allow her to mess everything up again. She, however, didn't stop. She sent me messages almost daily, some full of apologies, others laden with nostalgia for the moments we had shared. There were even a couple of missed calls in which, according to her voicemail message, she was crying. All I could think was, and where was all this when you decided to leave us? Meanwhile, I contacted a lawyer, not because I was considering fighting for custody. She hadn't yet made any move to claim it, but because I wanted to be prepared. I knew that her return could complicate things, and I didn't want her sudden emotions or feelings of guilt to affect my children's stability. One Saturday, while the children were playing in the garden, I received another call from her. This time, she wasn't crying or seeming desperate. She seemed defeated, her voice was low, and for the first time since this chain of events began, she sounded genuine. I just want you to listen to me one more time, she said. I didn't want to argue, so I agreed. She asked to meet me in person again, this time in a neutral place. I agreed, not because I wanted to reconcile, but because I felt there was something more she wasn't telling me. We met at a downtown cafe. She arrived early and was already sitting with a coffee in front of her. Her hands clasped on the table. When I sat down, her gaze lifted, and I saw something I hadn't seen in a long time: shame. She began by talking about the children, how much she missed them, and how she had underestimated how much they meant to her. Then she changed the subject. I want to be honest with you, she said, and what came next stunned me. Apparently, her life after leaving our family had not only been emotionally difficult, but also financially catastrophic. Not only had she lost the shine of her new job, she was in debt. It turned out that she had spent more than she earned trying to maintain the lifestyle that her friends promoted: excessive purchases, expensive parties, rent for a luxurious apartment, all financed by credit cards that were now maxed out. I thought I could handle it, but it all got out of control. And when I tried to ask my friends for help, they ignored me. They didn't even answer my messages. Hearing this confirmed what I already knew. She didn't want to return out of love or sincere repentance, but because she was in a hole and didn't see any other way out. But she hadn't finished the confession yet. The most shocking part was that, in her desperation, she had begun to consider legal options to fight for custody of the children. A lawyer told me that even though you have primary custody, I could still argue that it's better for them to live with me now that I plan to return here. That revelation ignited a fire within me. It was incredible how she had gone from asking for forgiveness to contemplating taking my children away from me. But what really angered me was her next sentence. But I don't want to get to that. I just want to fix things with you and the children. If you let me come back, I promise that everything will be different. I remained silent for a long time. Inside me, a small, vulnerable part wanted to believe her, wanted to think that she could change, that we could rebuild what we had lost. But the other part, the one that had endured months of abandonment and disappointment, knew it wasn't that simple. There was something bigger at stake: my children. Finally, I spoke. I've heard you, and I appreciate your honesty. But you must understand something. You can't just come back into our lives as if nothing has happened. The children have suffered from your absence, and I've had to be both their father and their mother since you left. And now you tell me that you considered taking me to court to take them away from me? How do you think that sounds to me? She tried to interrupt me, but I stopped her. I don't know what you expect from me, but I can't just forget everything because you're now sorry. You made your decisions, and those decisions affected us all. You can't undo the damage with empty promises. I stood up to leave. But before I did, I told her something I had been wanting to say for a long time. If you really want to do things right, don't do it for me. Do it for the children. But I want to make it clear that you can't just come back and pretend that everything is fine. If you've really changed, prove it, and if not, stay out of our lives. I left her there, sitting at the table with tears in her eyes. I didn't stop or look back. I didn't care about her repentance anymore. That night, I talked to my children about their mother. I didn't tell them everything, but I explained that even though she was trying to be more present, things wouldn't be the same as before. Mom loves you, but she's made some difficult decisions. For now, it's still the three of us. We're a good team, right? They both nodded and hugged me. And at that moment, I knew I had made the right decision. After that meeting, I expected her to back off. But she didn't. The following weeks were full of occasional messages. Some short and full of apologies. Others long and full of arguments about how we could try to rebuild something for the sake of the children. But for me, there was nothing more to rebuild. My patience, which was already worn thin, finally reached its limit when I received a letter from a lawyer. Yes, what she had mentioned in that cafe had now materialized. She was considering legal action to obtain shared custody. My lawyer, whom I had consulted from the beginning, assured me that I was in a solid position and that her case would be difficult to argue. But the fact that she was willing to put the children in the middle of a legal dispute after everything they had already gone through angered me more than I could express. Instead of responding with anger, I decided to play my cards strategically. I had learned from this whole process that she didn't act impulsively. Her moves were usually motivated by an attempt to control the circumstances. Albeit clumsily, but this time, I would be the one to take control. First, I made sure to document everything. I kept a detailed record of the children's progress, especially their notable improvement in their studies, showing emotional stability they didn't have before. I documented every positive interaction we had at home, family activities, games, conversations about their feelings. I knew that in the event of a legal dispute, this would be essential to show that their current environment was safe and happy. At the same time, I began to investigate a little more about her current life. With the help of a mutual friend, I discovered something that, although it didn't surprise me, gave me a significant advantage. Her financial problems were much deeper than she had admitted. Not only was she in debt, but she also faced the risk of being evicted from her apartment for not paying the rent. The worst part was learning that she had started looking for a second job to try to stay afloat. But what really shook me was knowing that she had tried to involve the children in her promises of reconciliation. In a video call she made with them, which I luckily supervised, she told them, "Soon we'll be together again. I promise." My children, confused, asked me after the call, "Is Mom going to live with us again?" It took all the self-control in the world not to rant against her at that moment. Instead, I sat down with them and calmly explained that things wouldn't work that way. That the situation with their mother was complicated, but that we would always be okay, no matter what happened. Finally, I decided to confront her one last time, but this time with clear facts and a plan. When she agreed to meet me, I thought she would arrive with the same defeated air she had shown before. But to my surprise, she seemed defiant. She surely expected an emotional conversation where I would give in at the end. But she had no idea what was coming. "I'm here because I want you to understand something very clearly," I began, placing a file on the table. Inside it was all the documentation I had collected, evidence of her abandonment, records of her lack of financial support, and even screenshots of her social networks showing how she had prioritized her luxurious life over her family. Her face changed when she saw the file. "What is this?" she asked in a trembling voice. "This is what I'm going to use if you decide to go ahead with that shared custody lawsuit. I know you're going through a difficult time, but I'm not going to allow you to use our children as a tool to fix your personal problems." My tone was firm but not aggressive. I wanted to make it clear that I wasn't playing. She tried to defend herself, saying that she just wanted to be close to the children and that she had the right to do so. I replied, "You had that right from the beginning, but you decided to leave. You decided to ignore them. Now they have stability, something you can't offer them at this moment." She tried to turn the conversation to a more emotional tone. "Can we find a way to work together? Why do you have to be so cruel?" But I didn't take the bait. I made it clear that it wasn't about cruelty, but about protecting my children from more chaos than they had already experienced. If you really want to be a part of their lives, start from scratch. Show that you can be a stable and responsible mother, not someone who uses them to solve her own instability. And forget about trying to fight for custody now, because I assure you that you won't win. That conversation marked a turning point. She knew I wasn't going to back down, and I think she finally understood that her actions had real consequences. I didn't hear from her legal attempts again after that. In the months that followed, She began to appear more sporadically, but always in a peripheral role. She didn't ask to stay with the children, only supervised visits, which I allowed for their benefit. As time went on, my relationship with my children grew even stronger, and our life found a peaceful rhythm that we hadn't known in years. Although I still have moments of anger when I think about everything that happened, I also feel a strange relief. I've learned that you can't always save someone from themselves, and that protecting those you love sometimes means closing doors that shouldn't be reopened. Story 3. My uncle gave me a cabin, but my dad tried to take it from me to pay off his debts with his business partner. Hi everyone, I don't really know how to start this, but I guess I'll do it from the beginning. 2 weeks ago, I turned 17, and my Uncle James gave me a gift I didn't expect at all. A cabin in Colorado that he had inherited from my grandfather a few years ago. The cabin is incredible. It's not huge, but it's surrounded by mountains, has a lake nearby, and looks like something out of a postcard. My Uncle James doesn't have children, so he's always been like a second father to me. He and my dad, Oliver, are brothers, but they've never gotten along very well. From what I understand, since they were teenagers, my uncle was always the responsible one, and my dad, well, the opposite. When he handed me the cabin papers in a folder, I didn't know what to say. At first, I thought it was a symbolic gift or something. But no, the title deed was officially in my name. It was mine. Now you'll have a place to disconnect and think about the future, my uncle told me, patting me on the back. Of course, at that moment, I had no idea of the chaos it was going to unleash. The last few years haven't been easy. My mom died 4 years ago in a car accident. Since then, my dad hasn't been able to manage his life. He lost his job a few months after the funeral, started drinking too much, and has been involved with some very shady people. Until recently, I thought things were improving because he had said he had a new business partner, a guy named Antoine, but it was all a facade. The cabin seemed like a ray of light in the middle of all that dark cloud. My plan was simple: use it to escape from time to time. Maybe even stay there during summer vacation and study in peace. But that same day, when I told my dad what Uncle James had given me, I saw his expression change from surprise to something I couldn't quite identify at the time. Until it became a problem. That night, my dad went out with Antoine, as he had been doing lately. But before he left, he made a strange comment. That cabin is a waste for someone your age. Maybe we should think of something more practical to do with it. I didn't pay much attention to it because I was used to his strange ideas and him always speaking in the plural, as if Antoine was involved in everything. It wasn't until 3 days later that I began to understand what he meant. I was in my room when I heard my dad talking loudly to someone in the living room. It was Antoine, and his tone was threatening. I can't wait any longer. Oliver, if you don't get that money soon, you're going to be in trouble. And you know I'm not playing, Antoine said. My heart raced because I had never heard anyone talk to my dad like that. What followed chilled me to the bone. Don't worry, my dad replied. My daughter has a cabin in Colorado. We're going to sell it. I'm already working on it. When I heard my dad talk about the cabin as if it were his, I felt like I was running out of air. I locked myself in my room, trying to process what I had just heard. How could he even think of selling something that didn't even belong to him? And what kind of trouble did he have with Antoine? Until that moment, I hadn't understood the gravity of the situation. I decided I couldn't stand idly by. I knew that my Uncle James wasn't going to take this situation well. But I didn't want to involve him unless it was absolutely necessary. I hadn't even had time to tell him how much his gift meant to me. Much less did I want to put him in the middle of a mess with my dad. So I chose not to tell him yet. The next day, my dad tried to act as if nothing had happened. He asked me if I had thought about what I was going to do with the cabin. His tone was casual, almost friendly, but behind his smile, there was something that worried me. I don't know, Dad. I think maybe I'll use it to study this summer. Why do you ask? I replied, trying not to raise suspicion. I just think it would be better if we sold that property. You know, we could use the money for something we really need. Besides, maintaining a cabin costs a lot. Surely you don't want to spend all your money on that, do you? I knew he was trying to manipulate me, but I also knew that I couldn't confront him directly. Despite everything, he was still my dad, and there was a part of me that didn't want to believe he was capable of something so selfish. I told him I would think about it and left the house before he could continue pressuring me. Searching for information on how to protect a property from any attempt at fraudulent sale. It turns out that since the cabin was in my name, my dad couldn't sell it without my direct consent. But there were ways he could try to do it anyway. The only way to completely secure it was to put some kind of alert on the property that required my notarized signature for any transaction. Luckily, my Uncle James had insisted that I use his lawyer for all procedures related to the cabin. So I decided to call him. After explaining what was happening, He assured me that he could help me protect the property. But he also warned me, "Be careful with your father, Olivia. This can escalate if you don't handle it well." That night, when I returned home, my dad was on the couch with a beer in his hand, watching television as if he had no worries in the world. I, on the other hand, was on the verge of collapse. I tried to avoid any conversation, but as I passed by him, he stopped me. "Did you talk to James today?" His tone was casual, but his gaze was intense. "No. Why do you ask?" "Just curious. I thought maybe he would have called you to see what you decided about the cabin." I knew he was looking for clues, trying to gauge whether I was aware of his plans. I felt a knot in my stomach, but I pretended to be distracted and went upstairs. The next day, when I returned from school, I found Antoine in our kitchen talking to my dad. That man's presence always made me nervous. He was tall, with a messy beard and a way of looking that seemed to pierce your soul. I never understood what my dad saw in him. "Hi, Olivia," Antoine said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Your dad has been telling me about that incredible cabin in Colorado. You know, I have some friends who would be very interested in buying it. You could make a small fortune." I tried to remain calm, even though my heart was about to jump out of my chest. "Oh, no, I plan to keep it. I want to keep it." Antoine laughed as if I had told a joke. "Come on, Olivia, what's a 17-year-old girl going to do with a cabin in the middle of nowhere? It doesn't make sense." It was at that moment that I realized that my dad wasn't going to stop. If Antoine was so involved, this was going beyond a simple passing idea. My dad must have promised the cabin to this guy to pay off his debts. And I was in the middle of it all. That night, I spoke with Uncle James's lawyer and explained that Antoine was pressuring my dad to sell the cabin. He reassured me and told me that he had already taken steps to legally protect the property, but that I should be prepared to face more pressure. In addition, I decided to call Uncle James. I didn't want to involve him, but I felt like I had no choice. When I told him what was happening, his silence was unsettling. "I'm going to handle this, Olivia. You don't have to worry. But listen carefully. Don't let that man intimidate you again. If your dad keeps pushing, I want you to call me immediately." Little did I know that my uncle had a plan. That same week, he asked me to accompany him to the cabin under the pretext of showing me how some of the systems worked. Upon arriving, I saw something strange. There were cameras installed inside and outside. "What's going on?" I asked, confused. "Don't worry, Olivia. This is just to make sure that if anyone tries anything, we have proof." I didn't fully understand what he was planning, but I trusted him. What I didn't know was that my dad had already tried to convince a fake buyer, and my uncle had orchestrated everything to catch him in the act. It wasn't long before the situation escalated. Just 2 days after our visit to the cabin, Uncle James called me at noon while I was at school. His tone was urgent. "Olivia, I need you to come to the cabin this afternoon. Your dad is into something bigger than we thought." My heart began to beat fast. I asked for permission to leave early and took a bus to the cabin. When I arrived, I found my uncle talking to a man who looked like a real estate agent. I recognized him immediately. It was the buyer that my dad and Antoine had mentioned days before. But something didn't add up. There was an air of conspiracy between my uncle and the supposed agent. "This is Kevin," James said, pointing to the man. "He's a friend of mine. Yesterday, your dad tried to sell him the cabin using forged documents." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own father had forged my signature and tried to sell the cabin without my consent. Kevin explained that my dad had presented himself as the sole owner, arguing that I didn't want to deal with the property because I was too young and didn't know how to manage it. My uncle continued, "The worst part is that Antoine was there too. They had Kevin meet them at a cafe. And when Kevin asked them to produce documents, your dad pulled out copies of a title that had evidently been altered." Rage and disappointment hit me like a truck. James took me inside the cabin and showed me the images from the security cameras he had installed days before. In them, Antoine and my dad could be clearly seen checking the place, evaluating every corner, probably to inflate the value of the property. My dad had even dared to bring a third person who appeared to be an unofficial appraiser. "Not only did they try to sell it," my uncle continued, "they planned to convince you to sign something after everything was arranged. Basically, they were going to corner you." That night, I returned home with the intention of confronting my dad. I was furious, but at the same time, the fear of facing him and Antoine had me on the edge of a breakdown. When I arrived, I found my dad in the living room reviewing some papers while talking on the phone. When he hung up, he looked at me with a smile that seemed out of place. "How was your day, Olivia?" he asked casually. I couldn't contain it any longer. "What are you doing with the cabin, Dad? I know what you tried to do." The change in his face was immediate. First he looked confused, then uncomfortable, and finally annoyed. "What are you talking about?" I haven't done anything with the cabin. I decided it was time to drop the bomb. I know you forged documents and tried to sell it to Kevin. I saw the security footage. And not only that, I know Antoine is involved in this. His face turned as red as a tomato. What footage? Who told you that? James. Always meddling where he's not wanted. It's not James's fault that you're irresponsible. I shot back, my voice trembling. How could you do something like this? Dad? That cabin isn't yours. It's mine. You thought you could get away with it? My dad jumped up, and for a moment I was afraid he would lose control. But before he could say anything, the front door opened, and there was my Uncle James, along with Kevin and another person I didn't recognize immediately. Oliver, I think we need to talk, my uncle said firmly, and I think you should know that what you've done is a crime. My dad backed away, clearly nervous. What are you talking about? James? This is ridiculous. James ignored his attempt to deflect the conversation. We have the proof. Oliver. Forged documents, security footage, everything. So you're going to do two things. First, you're going to sign a document committing to staying away from the cabin and from Olivia. Second, you're going to stay away from Antoine because, believe me, you don't want the authorities to start asking questions about him. To my surprise, the third person who was with James was a private detective. While my uncle was talking to my dad, the detective explained to me that Antoine wasn't just a business partner, but was involved in criminal activities, including extortion. My dad, desperate for money, had gotten involved with the wrong person. Antoine uses people like your father to launder money, the detective said. He tricked him into believing they could make a lot of money. But in reality he was just using Oliver to cover his back. My dad's face went from anger to defeat. He finally admitted everything. He asked for my forgiveness. But I didn't feel anything but emptiness. I knew I couldn't trust him ever again. My uncle and the lawyer took control of the situation. Not only did they protect the cabin, but they also managed to get Antoine investigated by the authorities. The last I heard of Antoine, he was fleeing the state. And my dad, well, let's just say my uncle made sure he couldn't come near me or the cabin ever again. My relationship with my dad completely broke down. But at least now I know I'm surrounded by people who truly care about me. The cabin is still my refuge. And every time I'm there, I remind myself that I'm not going to let anyone else try to manipulate me or take what's mine. The irony of all this is that my dad tried to use me to solve his problems and ended up losing everything. Now he's just a shadow in my life, while I'm finally starting to find peace in mine. After everything that happened with my dad and Antoine, I thought things would calm down. Wrong. The following weeks brought a series of unexpected events that made it clear to me that this chapter of my life was far from over. A few days after Uncle James and the lawyer took control of the situation, I received a call from an unknown number. When I answered, I heard a familiar voice that made me shudder. Antoine. Hi, Olivia, he said with chilling calm. Your dad and I are done. But that doesn't mean you and I can't work this out. I felt a knot in my stomach. I don't know what you're talking about. Antoine, you have nothing to work out with me. His tone changed, becoming more threatening. You have something that belongs to me. That cabin. If you think your uncle and his lawyer are going to stop me, you're wrong. There are always ways to make people change their minds. I hung up before he could say anything else and immediately called my uncle. James, Antoine just called me. He's threatening me. My uncle didn't seem surprised. I expected it. Don't worry, Olivia, we're already watching him, but I want you to come stay with me for a while. I don't want you to be alone. That same night, I temporarily moved in with James. While unpacking, he explained that he had hired private security to protect both the cabin and our family home. In addition, the private detective he had brought in initially was still investigating Antoine. It turned out that Antoine not only had a criminal record but was involved in several fraud schemes throughout the state. He's a dangerous man, Olivia, James said seriously, but he's also arrogant. His type always makes mistakes. The following weeks were full of tension. Although I never saw him in person, Antoine kept trying to contact me, either by phone or by sending messages through unknown people. On each occasion, my uncle and the lawyer took the evidence and brought it to the authorities, strengthening the case against him. One day, while we were at the cabin checking on some repairs, James received a call that changed everything. The detective had discovered that Antoine had a secret account where he laundered money using real estate, and that he had tried to use our cabin as part of his scheme. This gives us an advantage, the detective said. If we can prove it, Antoine will not only face charges for fraud but also for extortion. With this new information, my uncle and the lawyer decided to go on the offensive. They worked with the authorities to set a trap. They used Kevin, the fake buyer, to convince Antoine that there was still a chance to get the cabin, but that he needed to show up in person to close the deal. On the day of the meeting, everything was prepared. Antoine arrived at the agreed place. a coffee shop in downtown Denver, unaware that he was surrounded by undercover agents. While he was talking to Kevin, handing him forged documents and detailing how he planned to resell the cabin for more money. The agents arrested him. When my uncle called to tell me what had happened, I felt a relief I can't describe. Finally, Antoine was out of our lives, facing an endless list of charges. But my dad was still a delicate subject. My dad hadn't tried to contact me since his public humiliation. He had been avoiding my uncle and the lawyer. But I knew that eventually he would have to face the legal consequences of what he had done. What I didn't expect was that I would take the initiative. A few weeks after Antoine's arrest, I went looking for my dad. I found him in the small apartment he had rented after losing everything. He looked older, more tired, as if life had hit him mercilessly. But I didn't feel pity. I just had things to say to him. "Dad," I began, walking in uninvited, "I'm not here to reconcile. I'm here for you to understand something." He got up from the couch, looking uncomfortable. "Olivia, I don't understand why you're here." I interrupted him. "What you did was unforgivable. You tried to sell something that wasn't even yours. And all because you got involved with dangerous people. Worst of all, you used me. You didn't even think about what this would mean for me." He tried to answer, but I stopped him again. "Listen carefully. I don't want anything from you. I don't need you to try to apologize or try to explain yourself. But if you ever come near me again or try anything against my cabin or my uncle, I'll do everything in my power to make sure you end up behind bars." I haven't heard from my dad since that day. Uncle James and I decided to take a vacation together at the cabin to celebrate the fact that, for the first time in months, everything was calm. While we were there, sitting by the lake, I realized something important. "No matter what happens, you'll always have a safe place here," James said, breaking the silence. I smiled, looking at the mountains in the distance. "Thank you, James, for all of this. It's not just a cabin to me. It's my home." Now, every time I think about everything that happened, I don't feel resentment, but gratitude. Gratitude for having someone like James in my life. And for having learned that even though the people you trust may betray you, you can always find a way to move forward. And even though my dad and Antoine tried to take everything from me, all they managed to do was strengthen my resolve to never be manipulated again. Story 4. My own brother betrayed me by siding with my ex-husband. And that completely destroyed my life. I am going to start from the beginning because to understand how I got here, I need to break down my entire story. It is not one that I would like to tell, but I have it stuck in my throat. Maybe writing it here is the only way to get it out. When I was a child, my older brother and I were inseparable. He was 5 years older than me, but he acted as if that age difference did not exist. I remember how he taught me to ride a bicycle, how he protected me from bullies at school, and how he always had advice ready for any problem. I idolized him, and honestly, I never thought the day would come when that perfect image of him would crumble. But the years passed, and our lives took different paths. He stayed in Portland where he built a solid life with a good job, a modest house, and a routine that seemed taken from a quiet movie. I, on the other hand, was always the dreamer. I moved to Seattle after college, seeking a future full of adventures and challenges. It was during that stage that I met my now ex-husband. By then, my relationship with my brother was still good, although not as close as in childhood. But I never imagined that he would play such a central role in the worst stage of my life. My ex-husband and I met at a gathering of mutual friends. He was charismatic, ambitious, and had that special ability to make anyone feel important. At first, everything was perfect. I quickly fell in love with his self-confidence and the way he treated me as if I were the only person in the world who mattered. We got married after 2 years of dating, and for a time, I thought I was living my fairy tale. When we got married, we decided to establish our life on the outskirts of Seattle. We bought a charming house in a quiet neighborhood and adopted a dog named Max, a golden retriever full of energy. Everything seemed ideal, but problems began to appear little by little. My ex had a subtle way of controlling every aspect of my life, something that at first I confused with love and concern. He was the type who insisted on managing the finances because he was better with numbers, checked my phone for security, and wanted to know where I was all the time in case something happened to me. These things started to feel like a prison, but I did not realize it until much later. When I started working at a technology company, things got worse. It was my first job at a large company, and I was excited. I had a good salary, flexible hours, and a team that made me feel welcome. But my ex-husband did not see it the same way. Every time I arrived late from a meeting or stayed talking with colleagues, he made passive-aggressive comments about how wives should not neglect their husbands. At first, I laughed at those comments, but then they became more frequent and more serious. I remember one night when he yelled at me for coming home an hour later than usual. He told me that I did not respect our marriage, that I was probably giving the wrong image at work. That fight was the beginning of a chain of conflicts that destroyed our relationship. Each argument became more aggressive. I tried to justify it. I told my friends that he was stressed about work, that he just needed time to adjust to my new job. But the truth was that his behavior was becoming toxic. And the worst part is that I did not realize how much damage he was doing to me until it was almost unbearable. The breaking point came one day that I will never forget. It was a Thursday night, and I had forgotten to log out of my work email. He checked my laptop and found an email that a colleague had sent me, joking about a project we had finished together. There was nothing strange in the message, but he took it as proof that I was hiding something. That night, he yelled at me like never before. He called me disloyal and accused me of flirting with my coworker. I felt humiliated, trapped, and completely misunderstood. It was then that I knew something had to change. I started saving some money in a separate account, something I would never have imagined doing before. I knew my marriage was in its final stages, but I did not want to rush yet. I clung to the idea that we could fix things, even though it was increasingly clear that that was impossible. Finally, after months of tension, I decided to file for divorce. It was not an easy decision. Despite everything, I still felt something for him. Or maybe it was just the weight of the years we had shared together. But I knew I could not continue living that way. At first, I thought my family would be on my side. My parents supported me from the beginning, although with some reservations. My mom always said, "Are you sure divorce is a big thing?" My dad, although less expressive, told me he was proud of me for making a decision that was best for my well-being. However, my brother, well, his reaction was completely different. After filing for divorce, I thought the worst was over. I believed I just had to endure the legal part and move on with my life. However, I had no idea that the most painful thing was yet to come. And that it would come from someone I never expected, my brother. At first, it was not obvious that he was on my ex's side. When I told him about the divorce for the first time, his reaction was surprisingly neutral. He called me and asked how I was, although he said it with a kind of coldness that made me uncomfortable. He did not offer to visit me or talk more about the subject. But I assumed that he simply did not know how to handle the situation. After all, divorces affect the whole family, and I did not want to be too hard on him. However, my ex-husband did not take long to reveal the truth. One day, while reviewing emails related to the divorce process, I received a message from him that said, "I talked to your brother. He also thinks this is a mistake." I froze. What did that mean? Had my brother been talking to him behind my back? What exactly had they talked about? I tried to calm down and rationalize. Maybe my ex was simply manipulating the situation, trying to make me doubt my decision. But I could not get that phrase out of my head. So I called him. I wanted answers. "Did you talk to him?" I asked directly. When he answered, there was an awkward pause. Then he sighed. "Yes, we talked. He called me a few days ago to tell me what is going on." The tone in his voice put me on alert immediately. There was a kind of defensiveness in his tone, as if he already knew that I was not going to agree with what he was going to say. "And what did you tell him?" I asked. Trying to remain calm, I told him what I think. "I think you are making a mistake. Why can't you try a little longer? All marriages have problems. And I do not think this is something you cannot overcome." I remained silent, astonished. How could he say that after everything I had told him? He knew how controlling my ex was. He knew how trapped he had made me feel. And yet, he was suggesting that I should try harder. "Are you serious?" I finally replied, with a lump in my throat. "Do you really think I should stay with someone who has treated me like this? You know what I have been through." "Look, I am just saying that maybe you are being impulsive," he replied, his voice now more defensive. "He is also going through a difficult time. You know, he told me that he still loves you, that he is willing to change." That phrase was the last straw. I hung up without saying anything else, unable to continue listening to him justify someone who had clearly hurt me. I spent the rest of the night crying, not only for my failed marriage but because now I felt like I had lost my brother too. What followed was even worse. During the first divorce hearings, my ex-husband presented a statement signed by my brother as part of his legal strategy. In it, my brother said that I had an emotionally unstable character and that I often made rash decisions. Reading those words was like receiving a slap in the face. I felt like someone had ripped out my heart and trampled on it. When I asked my lawyer what that statement meant, he explained that my ex was using every possible resource to undermine my credibility and make the judge doubt my ability to handle any agreement that would benefit me. My brother had been a key piece in that strategy, and he had not even warned me. I decided to confront him. I called him, this time more angry than sad. "How could you do this to me?" I blurted out as soon as he answered the phone. "What are you talking about?" he asked, as if he had no idea what he had done. "Your statement. You said I am unstable. How could you know the damage that does to me? There was an awkward silence before he finally replied. Look, I just told the truth. Sometimes you act impulsively. And I thought the judge should know. I did not do it to hurt you. You did not do it to hurt you. But here I am, having to deal with the consequences. I yelled, tears of rage in my eyes. You are my brother. You are supposed to be on my side. This is not about taking sides. He replied, now clearly annoyed. I think you are both making mistakes. I just want the best for both of you. That was the last time we spoke for a long time. I could not stand his neutrality, which to me was nothing more than betrayal disguised as impartiality. I felt like I had lost a part of my family. And I was not sure how to move forward knowing that someone I trusted completely had chosen to support the person who was destroying me. But my brother's betrayal did not end there. Later in the divorce process, my ex-husband found a way to use my family against me. And what my brother did was even more devastating. After my brother's written statement during the first divorce hearings, I thought I had already hit rock bottom. I was wrong. I did not know that my brother's betrayal was just beginning, and that he was going to get even more deeply involved in a conflict that until then I thought was solely between my ex-husband and me. It all began to unravel during the final hearing. By that point, I had spent months preparing my case with my lawyer. We wanted to demonstrate how my ex had used tactics of financial and emotional manipulation to control my life during the marriage. We were also working on keeping the house and making sure the agreement was fair. But all that changed when my ex-husband arrived with a new strategy. He had convinced my brother to testify in his favor. The day of the hearing arrived, and when I saw my brother enter the courtroom, I froze. He was sitting on the other side of the room, right behind my ex-husband. There was no doubt what that meant. My heart was pounding as I tried to maintain my composure. But inside I felt like I was falling apart. When it was time for his testimony, I had a hard time listening to every word that came out of his mouth. It felt like a knife. My brother, someone who should have been my support, was there painting me as an irrational and troubled person. He talked about how I had always had trouble maintaining stable relationships, which was a total exaggeration, and how maybe I was not clearly seeing what was best for me. The worst part was when he said that my ex-husband had always been a good man who just wanted to fix things. By that point, my ex almost had a smile on his face. I do not know how I did not get up from my seat and run out of the room. At that moment, I remained motionless, feeling completely exposed and betrayed. My lawyer tried to cross-examine him, asking him about his knowledge of the situation in my marriage. But my brother stuck to his statements, saying that he was only sharing his perspective as someone close to us. He had no proof of anything. But the damage was done. After his testimony, I had a hard time staying calm. I left the room as soon as we had a recess and locked myself in the bathroom. Looking at myself in the mirror, I wondered how I had gotten to this point. What had I done to deserve this from someone I had always loved so much for years? I thought my brother and I had an unbreakable bond. Now, I was not so sure. Later, when the emotions calmed down a bit, I decided to confront him. I called him that same night after returning from court. I knew he probably would not answer, but I had to try. To my surprise, he answered on the first ring. "What do you want?" he said in a tired tone, as if he did not have time for me. "What do I want? I want to know why you are doing this." I yelled, my voice shaking with anger. "You are my brother. How can you be on the side of someone who has hurt me so much?" There was a pause before he answered. And what he said was like a bucket of cold water. "I am not on anyone's side. I am trying to do the right thing," he replied calmly, as if what he had done was not an act of betrayal. The right thing is to side with my ex-husband and lie in court. Saying that I am unstable when you know perfectly well what I have been through. I shot back, my voice breaking mid-sentence. "I am not lying. I am saying what I believe is true. Besides, he asked me to talk. He told me that he really loved you and that he was desperate to fix things with you," he said, as if his words were some kind of favor to me. That was the moment I understood that there was nothing I could say to change his mind. My brother had decided that my ex-husband was the victim in this story, and I was the villain. It did not matter how much I tried to explain my perspective to him. He had already made his decision. I hung up on him before I could say anything else. I knew it was not worth fighting anymore. But that night, while I was alone in my house, I could not help but cry. I felt like I was not only losing my marriage but also my own family. The days that followed were a whirlwind. My lawyer did his best to neutralize the impact of my brother's testimony. But the damage was already done. My ex used those statements to portray me as someone irrational. And although he managed to keep some of the original agreements, it was clear that his strategy had partially worked. I lost several financial concessions that would have been crucial for my stability after the divorce. After everything was over, my brother wrote me a message as if nothing had happened. I did not open it. I could not bear to read his excuses. I blocked him on my phone, on my social media, and in my life. I decided it was not worth trying to maintain a relationship with someone who had not hesitated to betray me in that way. After my divorce was finally settled, I thought I could start rebuilding my life. It was not easy. I had lost a lot: my marriage, my financial stability, and, most painfully, the relationship with my brother. But I wanted to look ahead, focus on work, and try to leave everything behind. However, it was not long before my ex-husband and my brother found a new way to ruin me. It all started with rumors. A colleague from work casually mentioned that she had heard something strange about me. According to her, someone had said that I had been difficult during my marriage and that I had left my husband because I wanted freedom. At first, I laughed. I thought it was nonsense, unfounded gossip. But then more people started saying similar things. And little by little I realized that my ex was behind it all. One night, while checking my email, I saw a message from an unknown account. The subject line said, "What everyone should know." When I opened it, I found an attached document that contained screenshots of private conversations between my ex and other people. In the messages, he said terrible things about me, that I was manipulative, that I had ruined our relationship because I could not commit, and, worst of all, that I had had an affair at work. He had even added photos of us from when we were married, along with sarcastic comments about how we appeared to be happy. What left me speechless was seeing my brother participating in those conversations. Although he did not say directly cruel things, he supported my ex's claims, commenting on things like, "Yes, she has always been impulsive, and it is a shame they cannot fix it." There was one particular screenshot where he said, "Sometimes I think she was never ready for marriage." Reading that was devastating. Not only was my ex-husband tarnishing my reputation, but my own brother was supporting him. I did not know what to do. My first reaction was to call him and confront him again, but I knew it would not do any good. I had tried it before, and all I got was more frustration. So I did something I would not normally do. I wrote an email to my whole family. I explained everything that was going on, including the screenshots, and I asked them to help me stop my brother and my ex-husband. The email unleashed family chaos. My parents were furious, not so much with my brother, but with me, for making the problem public. My mom called me crying, saying that I should have handled things privately. My dad, on the other hand, barely said a few words, but it was clear that he did not want to be involved. My cousins and uncles, on the other hand, were on my side. Some even called my brother to complain directly, which led him to send me a message full of insults. "Why do you always have to make everything so dramatic?" he wrote. "If it were not for you, this would not be happening." It was the last straw. I blocked him again, this time everywhere. I felt there was no turning back. He had decided that my ex was his priority, and I was ready to leave him behind, along with all the people who were not on my side. The situation escalated when my ex-husband started sharing the screenshots on social media. He had created a fake profile to spread everything, and although he never mentioned my name directly, it was obvious that he was talking about me. Friends from work and acquaintances began to ask me what was going on. Some even stopped talking to me, probably because they believed the lies. It was humiliating. I decided that I could not continue allowing this to happen. I consulted a lawyer to see what I could do, although there were few legal options due to the lack of concrete evidence of defamation. My ex had been cunning enough not to use my name. I was recommended to save everything and be prepared for any eventuality. They also advised me to talk to human resources at my work, in case this came to affect my employment. Talking to human resources was a painful experience. I had to sit down and explain everything: my divorce, the rumors, and how my ex was trying to destroy my reputation. Luckily, they were understanding and promised to be vigilant in case anything came up at the office. However, knowing that my personal problems were now known at work was humiliating. I felt that my privacy had been completely violated. In the midst of all this, something unexpected happened. One day, I received a message from someone I did not expect to hear from: my brother's girlfriend. She wrote to me on Instagram saying that she wanted to talk to me. At first, I hesitated to respond, but curiosity got the better of me. When we finally talked, she told me something that left me speechless. My brother had been telling his own version of the story to everyone, including her. According to what she told me, my brother had told her that I was a liar and that my ex was only trying to defend himself from my attacks. He had also said that I was the one who had ruined the relationship with him, not the other way around. But what struck me the most was that she did not believe him. She told me that she had been observing his behavior and that she was beginning to notice a pattern of manipulation. Although she did not say that she was completely on my side. She thanked me for sharing my version and asked me for proof of what had happened. I sent her all the screenshots I had, including the conversations where he supported my ex's lies. She was silent for a moment, and then said, "Thank you. I needed to know this." I did not know what to do with that information. On the one hand, I felt a bit of relief knowing that someone else saw my brother for who he really was. But on the other hand, I felt more isolated than ever. My own family was broken, and I did not know if I could ever fix it. After the conversation with my brother's girlfriend, I thought things would start to calm down. But what came next was a real avalanche. Apparently, my conversation with her had caused tension in their relationship. And although I had no way of confirming it, I suspected that she had confronted my brother with everything I showed her. I knew this because a few days later, my brother sent me a furious email. "What kind of person are you to meddle in my relationship?" he wrote. "Is it not enough for you to destroy your own life? Now you have to drag me down with you." I read those words with a mixture of rage and sadness. I did not respond to him. There was no point in doing so. But I was not wrong in thinking that that email was the beginning of something bigger. A few weeks later, everything exploded. I received a call from my mother on a Monday afternoon. Something unusual because she normally respected my work schedule. Her voice sounded tense, and she did not take long to drop the bomb. My brother had ended his relationship. According to her, he was destroyed and blamed everyone, but especially me. "What did you tell his girlfriend?" my mother asked, almost accusing me. I took a deep breath before answering. I knew that nothing I said was going to change her perception. But I made an effort to explain. I just showed her the truth. "Mom, she had a right to know what he is really like. I cannot continue covering for him. He is your brother," she yelled, something she did not do often. "Do you not understand what you are doing? He is losing everything. And you are not helping." I hung up the call before saying anything I might regret. That conversation confirmed what I already suspected. My parents were never going to take my side in this. My mother still saw me as the one responsible for all the chaos while my brother presented himself as the victim. It was painful, but also liberating. For the first time, I accepted that I could no longer count on my family. In the days that followed, I started receiving messages from other relatives. Some were supportive, others not so much. A cousin told me that my brother was spreading rumors that I had sabotaged his life because I never got over the divorce. At first, those comments bothered me, but over time I realized it was not worth worrying about what they thought. I knew the truth, and that was enough. What I did not expect was that my ex-husband would also try to take advantage of the situation. One day, I received a call from an unknown number. I do not normally answer numbers I do not recognize, but something prompted me to answer. It was him. "Hi, I know you probably do not want to hear from me, but I think we should talk," he said, his tone calmer than I expected. I was about to hang up, but I decided to listen. "Just out of curiosity, I have nothing to say to you," I replied dryly. "Look, I know things got out of control between us, and I want to apologize. I should not have involved your brother in that way." His apology sounded rehearsed, almost mechanical, but something in his tone made me pause. "Why are you saying this now?" I asked suspiciously. "Because I think we both need to put this behind us." "What happened between your brother and me?" "Well, it does not matter anymore. I just want us to move on with our lives." I did not believe him for a second. My ex had always been skilled at manipulating situations to his advantage. And this was no exception. But his call left me thinking. Maybe, after all, he was beginning to lose control of the narrative he had built. Maybe he was finally facing the consequences of his actions. As for my brother, things continued to fall apart for him. Shortly after breaking up with his girlfriend, he began having problems at work. I do not know the details, but a cousin told me that he had been temporarily suspended due to inappropriate conduct related to another colleague. Although I never celebrated his suffering, I could not help but feel that the universe was finally balancing things out. However, what really surprised me was when, months later, I received a text message from him. It was brief, almost cold. "You ruined everything, but I hope you are satisfied. Do not worry, you will not hear from me again." I did not reply. I knew there was nothing I could say that would change his mind. And frankly, I did not care anymore. I had spent so long trying to justify myself to him, trying to repair a relationship that was clearly beyond repair. This time, I decided to let him go. Over time, life began to stabilize. I found a new job in another city, far from all the drama that had consumed my life. I built a small circle of friends who became my true family. People who supported me in the darkest moments and who never judged me. Little by little, I learned to leave the resentment behind and focus on what really mattered. As for my family, things never went back to the way they were. My parents still try to contact me from time to time, but I keep my distance. I do not hate them, but I do not feel the need to have them close either. My brother, on the other hand, disappeared completely from my life, and I am okay with that. Sometimes peace only comes when you learn to let go. Story 5. My partner betrayed me with my best friend. It destroyed our family. And then she tried to come back when everything fell apart in her new life. I never thought that my life, at 36 years old, would crumble in a matter of weeks. My partner and I had been together since college. A typical story. We met at a party, connected instantly, and started a life together full of shared dreams and goals. Until 6 months ago, I was convinced that we were a solid couple. We had a 13-year-old daughter, a home in the suburbs of Texas, and a small business that had grown with years of sacrifices. My business, a graphic design firm, was something I built from scratch. When the pandemic hit, I lost several employees, but it was my best friend since childhood who stepped up to help me lift it up again. I trusted him not only as a partner but as a brother. We had grown up in the same neighborhood, sharing every step of our lives. I never imagined that he would be the one who would end up destroying it. My partner seemed increasingly distant, checking her phone with a furtive smile or disappearing to go out with friends. I did not want to seem paranoid. I thought that maybe she was stressed or needed space. But one night, after she fell asleep, I saw a notification on her screen. It was a message from my friend. His tone too familiar. I am not the type to invade the privacy of others. But something compelled me to open that conversation. What I found left me breathless. Months of romantic messages, hidden dates, and love sessions. My heart plummeted. The person I trusted most in the world had been betraying me. And with my best friend. I did not confront either of them immediately. I spent days trying to understand how to handle it, whether to confront them or remain silent. It was my daughter who finally gave me strength. Her innocence and her trust in us as a family made me realize that she deserved the truth, even if it meant destroying what we had built. When I finally decided to confront them, it was a disaster. She did not deny anything. She simply told me that she was tired of our life, of the routine, and that she had found something exciting with him. My friend, upon hearing what I knew, did not try to justify it. He just said that things happened and that he did not want to hurt me, but that he was in love. The betrayal was not only romantic but also professional. I discovered that my friend had been manipulating the numbers of our company, transferring profits to a secret account. He not only stole my partner but also a part of the business we built together. The blow was double. I lost two of the most important people in my life, and I had to fight to save what was left of my company while protecting my daughter from the chaos that was unfolding. But that was not the worst. It was the day she told me, without remorse, that she had wanted to leave for years, that she was never really sure of our relationship from the beginning. When I finally understood that my life would never be the same again after the confrontation, everything felt surreal. It was as if my life had become one of those movies you watch in disbelief, thinking, this will never happen to me. But there I was, in the middle of the disaster. She packed her things quickly and left that same night. She did not ask me for anything, not money or belongings. It was as if our life together had meant absolutely nothing to her. She just said it would be better this way. Cleaner. My daughter was in her room while all this was happening, probably listening to every word. Although I tried to keep the discussion as discreet as possible, that was the hardest part. Seeing her that night after her mother left. She was sitting on the bed, her eyes red from crying, hugging a family photo that used to be on the living room shelf. Why did mom leave? She asked me. I wanted to lie to her, protect her, tell her that things sometimes do not work out and that adults make mistakes. But I could not after everything that had happened. So I told her the truth. Without going into too much detail, I explained that her mother had made wrong decisions and that although it had hurt us, we were going to be okay. Just her and me. My daughter is strong, stronger than I ever was at her age. She nodded, wiped her tears, and said something that left me speechless. Then we are going to do it better. You and I okay? In that moment, I knew I had to do everything possible for her, even though inside I felt broken into 1,000 pieces. In the following days, I tried to keep myself busy with work, but even that was full of complications. My ex-friend, how could I still call him friend after what he did, had left a mess in the business finances. It took me weeks to discover the full extent of the damage: mismanaged accounts, dissatisfied clients, and a professional reputation that was beginning to falter. I had worked years to build something solid, and he had crumbled it in a matter of months. I tried to contact him, not to argue but to demand answers. But he did not answer. The few times he did, he spoke to me with an indifference that made my blood boil. It is not personal. It is just that things change, was the only thing he said before hanging up on me the last time. Meanwhile, my ex-partner had also seemed to disappear almost completely. She did not call. She did not send messages. Not even to talk to our daughter. That angered me more than anything else. As much as she had betrayed me, she was still a mother. But it seemed that she did not even care about that. The weeks turned into months, and little by little life began to stabilize. My daughter and I found a new routine. We cooked together, watched movies, and gradually learned to fill the void that she had left. It was not easy, but at least we had something she did not: peace. Just when I thought things were improving, she reappeared. It was a Friday night, and I was in the living room working on some business papers when I heard the door. My daughter was in her room, and I thought maybe it was one of her friends coming to get her. But it was not. She, my ex, was standing in the doorway with an expression of regret that would have moved me if it were not for all the damage she had caused. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice trembling as if she were on the verge of tears. I let her in, more out of curiosity than a desire to hear what she had to say. She told me that things had not turned out as she expected. My ex-friend, now her partner, had shown his true colors. He had started to treat her badly, to control her, and finally to ignore her. She was repentant, she said, and wanted to come back. It was a surreal conversation. There was the woman who had shattered my trust, asking to come back as if nothing had happened. She told me she was doing it for our daughter, that she wanted to be a family again. "For our daughter?" I replied with a bitter laugh. "The same daughter you ignored for months? The same daughter who had to watch you destroy this family with your lies?" She had no words to answer me. The only thing she did was cry. But this time, her tears had no effect on me. My daughter, who had been listening from the stairs, came down at that moment. She looked at me and then at her, and with a coldness I had never seen in my daughter. She said, "No, you have no right to be here." The look on my daughter's face as she uttered those words was something I will never forget. She was only 13 years old, but at that moment she seemed much older. It was as if all the pain, disappointment, and rage she had been holding onto had finally been released. My ex-partner, visibly shocked, tried to approach her, but my daughter stepped back, crossing her arms. "Do not come with your tears now," my daughter said, her voice firm but trembling. "You left without looking back, and you did not care how I felt. Now you want to come back because it did not work out with him. Not because you miss me, not because you want to fix what you broke, but because you are lonely." My daughter's words were like daggers. My ex tried to respond, babbling something about how things had been more complicated than they seemed. But my daughter was not willing to listen. "You are not mom," she added with a harshness that broke my heart. "You are just a woman who made horrible decisions and who is now paying for them." At that moment, I intervened. Although I felt my daughter was right, I did not want that conversation to become any more toxic than it already was. "Go to your room, honey," I said softly. "I will take care of this." She looked at me as if she wanted to say something else, but finally nodded. Before leaving, she cast one last glance at her mother. A mixture of sadness, anger, and above all, disappointment. My ex-partner stood in the living room, her eyes fixed on the floor while I tried to calm down. "What did you expect when you came here?" I asked her after a moment. My tone was not aggressive, but neither was it kind. I was tired, and the patience I once had with her was gone. "What? That I would open my arms as if nothing happened? That my daughter would forget all the pain you caused her because you decided that now you want to be here?" She looked up, her eyes full of tears. "I do not understand," she replied, her voice breaking. "I know I made mistakes. I know I ruined everything. But he was not who I thought he was. I thought that it would be different. And what does that have to do with us?" I replied curtly, "We are not your backup plan. We are not something you can return to when your fantasy falls apart." She tried to justify her actions, talking about how she had been confused, how it had been a mistake to leave our family. She said she felt lost, that she thought she was looking for something new, but that in reality she already had everything she needed with us. Her words sounded desperate, but to me they were empty. If she truly valued what we had, she would not have done what she did. "You cannot come here and expect everything to go back to the way it was." I told her finally, "Maybe you can recover some of the relationship with our daughter in the future. But that depends on her, not on me. I am not going to force her to accept something she does not want. And just so we are clear, there is absolutely nothing between you and me to salvage." Her tears intensified, and for a moment I thought she would collapse on the floor. But I did not feel sorry for her. This was something she had brought upon herself. After a few minutes of uncomfortable silence, she wiped her tears and asked if she could talk to our daughter before leaving. "That is not my decision," I replied. "If you want to try to rebuild something with her, you have to earn it. But I warn you, it will not be easy. And it will not be now." She nodded weakly, took her bag, and headed for the door. Before leaving, she turned and looked at me one last time. "I am sorry for everything," she said in a whisper. But her apologies no longer meant anything to me. That night, I talked to my daughter. I wanted to make sure she was okay after everything that had happened. She was sitting on her bed, looking at the same photo she had hugged the night her mother left us. "How are you feeling, honey?" I asked as I sat next to her. She sighed, putting the photo aside. I do not know, Dad. I want to hate her. But I also want her to be my mom. But I do not know if I could ever trust her again. I explained that what she was feeling was completely valid. That she did not have to make any decisions right now. I told her that I was proud of her for being so strong and for saying what she felt. But I also reminded her that she was a child and that she did not have to carry all this alone. I would be there for her always. Thank you, Dad, she said, hugging me. For the first time in months, I felt that we were taking a step forward, even though the road was long. The days following my ex-partner's visit passed in a strange calm. My daughter and I tried to resume our routine, but it was evident that her return had left a crack in our tranquility. Although we did not mention her, her shadow remained present in the uncomfortable silences and in my daughter's glances when she thought I was not looking. One afternoon, while checking some business emails, I received an unexpected message. It was from my ex-best friend, the man who not only betrayed my trust but also contributed to destroying my family and my business. It said something like, I know you probably do not want to talk to me, but there is something important I need to tell you. Can we meet? My first reaction was to ignore him. Block him even. What could he tell me that was not just another excuse? But there was a part of me, a small and annoying part, that wanted to hear what he had to say. It was not curiosity. It was more the need to close chapters, to make sure that no stone was left unturned. I agreed to meet with him, but under my conditions. We met in a small cafe on the other side of town, far from my house and any place that meant something to me. When I arrived, he was already there, looking haggard, with deep dark circles and messy hair. It was a shocking contrast to the confident and charismatic man he used to be. Thank you for coming, he said in a low voice, almost fearful. I sat across from him, crossing my arms, waiting for him to speak. I was not going to make it easy for him. I know I messed up. He began without looking up. I do not expect you to forgive me, but I had to tell you something. I needed to explain why I did what I did. Explain? I replied, letting out a bitter laugh. There is no justification for what you did. You betrayed me, my family, and our business. So go ahead, enlighten me. What could possibly justify something like that? He took a deep breath, as if preparing for a well-rehearsed speech. But what came out of his mouth was a mess of confessions and excuses. He told me that he had been jealous of my life, that even though we were partners, he felt that I always had control, that I was the favorite among our clients. According to him, all this led him to make mistakes that spiraled out of control. And then there was her, he added, referring to my ex. I did not plan for it to happen, but we understood each other in a way that I could not understand with you. I thought I would find something new, something worth sacrificing what I had with you. And did you find it? I snapped, looking directly at him. Was it worth it? He shrugged, his expression dejected. No, I lost everything, my job, my reputation, and now she left me. That took me by surprise. She left you? It was not that I cared what happened between them, but the irony was too great to ignore. He nodded, staring at his coffee cup as if it held the answer to his misery. Yes, he said. She said I was a burden, that I ruined her life by leaving everything for her. And she is right. There was a moment of silence in which I debated feeling sorry for him or simply enjoying the poetic justice. I opted for the latter. And why are you telling me this? I asked finally. What do you expect from me? He looked up, and for the first time in a long time, I saw something resembling sincerity in his eyes. I do not expect anything. I just wanted to apologize. I know it does not change anything, but I needed to tell you. I leaned towards him, keeping my voice firm. Your apology means nothing to me. Not because it is not sincere, but because it is too late. You destroyed everything we had, and you did it for selfish reasons. So thank you for the words, but I do not need them. I got up before he could answer. I was not going to give him the satisfaction of a longer conversation. As I walked towards the exit, I felt lighter than I expected. Maybe I had not completely closed the wound, but at least I had taken another step towards moving on. When I got home, I found my daughter in the living room, looking through an old photo album. I sat next to her, curious to know what she was looking for. I just wanted to remember how things were before, she said without looking up. In her hands, she held a photo of the four of us together, her, me, her mother, and yes, my ex-best friend. It was from a barbecue in the backyard. Everyone smiling as if we were the happiest family in the world. Things were different then, I murmured. They were fake. Now, at least we know the truth. And that is better. Her words, although harsh, were true. We could build something new. Something real. The truth, however painful it was, had freed us from the lies. The days continued to move forward. And little by little, my daughter and I began to feel a stability that we had not known since all this began. However, the tranquility did not last too long. One afternoon, while I was finishing picking up my daughter from school, I received a notification from an unknown number. It was a short message. Almost cryptic. "I hope we can talk soon. There are things I need to fix. Not for me, but for our daughter." It was from my ex-partner. My first instinct was to ignore the message. I did not want another confrontation. Neither for me nor for my daughter. But at the same time, I knew I could not avoid her forever. Especially since she insisted on wanting to rebuild something with our daughter. That night, I told my daughter about the message. I wanted to be completely transparent with her, as I had been from the beginning. "Your mom wants to talk. She says it is for you. Do you want to hear what she has to say?" My daughter remained silent for a moment, playing with the edge of her shirt. Finally, she looked up and said something I did not expect. "I want to hear her. But not alone. I want you to be there with me." So we organized it. I chose a public park. A neutral place where my daughter could feel safe and where there would not be a prolonged confrontation. When the day arrived, my ex appeared visibly nervous, with trembling hands and swollen eyes. She seemed much more fragile than the woman I had known. But I reminded myself that I should not confuse that with sincerity. We sat at a picnic table with my daughter between us, and the conversation began. At first, my ex tried to apologize. Her words were slow, deliberate, as if she were choosing each one carefully. She talked about how she had made mistakes, how she had been blinded by what she thought was love, and how she had let her selfishness destroy everything she had. "I know there is no excuse for what I did," she said, looking at our daughter with tear-filled eyes. "But I want to try to fix things with you. I want to be a part of your life again, even if it is just a little. Whatever you allow me." My daughter, always more mature than she seemed, listened carefully. She did not say anything until my ex finished speaking. Then she took a deep breath and in a tone that was both serious and calm. She replied, "Mom, I know you are sorry. But you cannot expect me to let you back into my life as if nothing happened. You left me when I needed you most. You did not call. You did not write. You did not even ask if I was okay. I do not know if I can trust you again." The blow was clear. My ex seemed devastated, but she also knew that she could not argue with what my daughter was saying. For the first time, I saw her facing the consequences of her actions without trying to justify herself. "I understand that you do not trust me now," she finally replied, "but I am willing to earn that trust. No matter what, I will do whatever it takes. If you need time, I will give it to you. I just want you to know that I am here. That I will always be here." My daughter nodded but said nothing more after that. The conversation ended quickly. We said goodbye, and my ex left, leaving behind a mix of emotions that would take us days to process. That night, while we were having dinner, my daughter finally broke the silence. "I do not know if I can ever forgive her," she said, looking at her plate, "but I want to try. For me, not for her." I felt incredibly proud of her at that moment. Her ability to see beyond her own pain, to seek healing for her own well-being, was something that inspired me deeply. I told her that I agreed with whatever she decided and that I would always be there to support her. No matter what happened. The following months were a slow process, full of ups and downs. My ex began to send occasional messages, small attempts to connect with our daughter. At first, my daughter was distant, responding with monosyllables or not responding at all. But over time, the responses became longer, more open. It was not an immediate or easy change. There were days when my daughter cried in her room, dealing with the complexity of wanting to love someone who had hurt her so much. There were days when she simply did not want to talk about it. And I respected her space. As for me, I found an unexpected peace in seeing how my daughter took the reins of her relationship with her mother. I knew that I could not repair that relationship for her, but seeing her handle it with such maturity gave me the certainty that I was raising someone strong. Someone who could overcome even the most difficult moments. My ex and I never became friends again. Not even close, but we managed to establish a cordial relationship for the sake of our daughter. She still lived in another city, so the visits were sporadic, but enough for my daughter to begin to heal slowly.